Today, the monsoon session of Parliament begins, and as we mentioned, it's likely to be a stormy one. Opposition parties have geared up to corner the centre over the Agnipath military recruitment scheme, inflation, unemployment, and also the alleged collapse of constitutional bodies. A day after the government urged all parties to cooperate for a smooth functioning of the House. After an all-party meet on Sunday, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi said that 32 bills are set to be tabled in the two houses, of which 14 are ready. The government, he said, wants discussions on all of them in a democratic way. Some of them have already been discussed by standing committees of Parliament, and he also dismissed the controversy over the new list of parliamentary words and the circular against dharna and demonstration, saying it's part of regular procedure. Well, let's go across to Sunil for more. And Sunil, tell us more about, what's expected in Parliament. Opposition geared up to target the government, but a lot of business also on the cards.
That's right. A lot of business from the government point of view. They would like to pass critical and crucial bills. But of course, the opposition keen on having a discussion on various key issues. One, of course, as you know, is the flashpoint of Agnipath, where we saw youth agitated last month, agitating across India. And it's in that context that the government not keen on really having a discussion on this entire issue because they face it's a defense clause. But we'll have to wait and see how things evolve. But definitely the focus in the next few days will be to see how the government and the opposition try to bury their hatchet. But they will definitely have to try to address certain concerns which the opposition would like to raise on the floor of the House.
All right, and another key thing that's happening today is the presidential election. So let's get to those details. Today, more than 4,000 MPs and MLAs will be casting their votes to elect the 15th president of the country. It's National Democratic Alliance's presidential candidate Droupadi Murmu versus opposition's joint pick Yashwant Sinha, who are the two candidates in the race for the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Now, the numbers are, however, stacked for Murmu. That's been clear for a while now, with several regional parties extending their support to her. She's a former governor of Jharkhand, and her victory will be marked by several firsts. She will be the first president born in independent India. At 64, she'll also be one of the youngest, in fact, occupant of Rashtrapati Bhavan, besides being the first tribal leader to hold the country's top office. Sinha is backed by the Congress, NCP, Trinamool, left parties, Samajwadi Party, RJD, among others, and Aam Aadmi Party is also supporting Sinha's candidature. Now, on the border of Jharkhand and Odisha is the remote village of Uper Beda in the Mayurbhanj district. It's from these humble beginnings that Droupadi Murmu began her journey, a journey that could take her to the highest office in the country. That does seem like a shoo-in. From the backward Santhal tribe, Droupadi Murmu forged a successful career in politics. She was a two-time MLA and governor of Jharkhand before becoming the NDA's candidate for president. Now, in her small village, there is a huge sense of pride in the women, in the woman who now stands today as the symbol of empowerment. NDTV's Harsha Kumari Singh travelled to Droupadi Murmu's ancestral home.
On the border of Orissa and Jharkhand is this small village called Upar Beda in Mayurbhanj district. This is the village where India is all set to perhaps elect its second woman president and the first tribal president. The NDA's candidate Droupadi Murmu lived in this house. This is her ancestral home, and this is where her journey began. From the Santhal tribe, it's been a remarkable journey for a young girl who started off her life. She was the first girl to go to college from her village. Two-time MLA, she's also been governor of Jharkhand. Interestingly, some relatives of Droupadi Murmu still live in this house. Her father's younger brother's son and neighbors, who are of course delighted that somebody from their family, from their community, is probably going to make it to the highest office in the country. Now, I have with me here, he is her father's younger brother's son and the daughter-in-law of the family. Let me begin by asking him, आपका नाम बताइए.
भक्तबंधु टुडू।
आप द्रौपदी मुर्मू जी के क्या लगते हैं?
भाई।
भाई लगते हैं। तो आज सब लोग कल देख रहे हैं, कल वोटिंग होने वाला है, वोट डालेंगे कि सबसे पहले जो प्रेसिडेंट बनने वाला है। संथाल जो आदिवासी लोग हैं, संथाल लोग में से किसी का प्रेसिडेंट बनना एक बहुत बड़ी बात है। आप लोग खुश तो होंगे ही, लेकिन और क्या कहना चाहेंगे इसके बारे में?
खुश तो बहुत खुशी लग रहा है। तो हम लोग का जो संथाल परिवार से गए हैं तो
और द्रौपदी मुर्मू जी तो आपका तो निजी बहन भी है ना?
हाँ।
तो आते हैं दीदी, आपसे मिलते हैं?
मिलते हैं।
हाँ।
तो जनवरी महीने को आए थे यहाँ, मिल के बातचीत करके और गए।
हाँ। आपके पास एक फोटो भी है उनका, जरा दिखाएंगे आप? सो दिस इज अ नेबर हियर। आप उनका पड़ोस में हैं। क्या नाम है आपका?
महेंद्र गिरी।
महेंद्र जी, यहाँ पे लोग को क्या लग रहा है, जो द्रौपदी मुर्मू जी देखिए पहली लड़की थी जिसने जाके कॉलेज किया है ना, गवर्नर रही हैं, एमएलए रही है, इतना छोटा सा गांव है, तो क्या लोग क्या सोचते हैं यहाँ पर?
बहुत खुशी वो सोचते हैं।
खुश है लोग।
हाँ,
और दूसरे लड़की लोग को भी लगता है कि हमको भी आगे करना चाहिए। हाँ? ये फोटो दिखाइए, क्या फोटो है, इसको बताइए, इसमें कौन कौन है?
ये तो मैडम है, माँ है और छोटा भाई है।
अच्छा, उनका छोटा भाई है।
हाँ, छोटा।
कहाँ रहते हैं इनका भाई?
भाई रारंगपुर में।
रारंगपुर।
हाँ
जी। अब मैं एक महिला से पूछने चाहूंगी, उनके परिवार से हैं, जो लेडीज इतना अच्छा किया है आगे इनका परिवार से, आप उसके बारे में कुछ बोलिए। और दीदी, आपका क्या लगती है?
और मेरा फुप्पू है।
हाँ।
दीदी, मैं उनका बहू हूँ। हाँ, हम लोग को बहुत खुशी लग रहा है, गांव के लोग को भी बहुत खुश है। एक महिला राष्ट्रपति बनने के जा रहा है।
आपका नाम बताइए।
दुलारी टुडू।
अच्छा दुलारी जी, ये जो है ये आपका बेटी है? हाँ। अच्छा, इससे मैं पूछूंगी, हाँ, आपका जो मम्मी का फूफू है आपका, हाँ, अगर वो राष्ट्रपति बनेंगे तो आप आगे क्या करोगे? हाँ। आपको लगता है वो देख के कि हम भी कुछ कर सकते हैं?
हाँ।
क्या करोगे?
हम भी वैसे बनेंगे।
तुम भी वैसे बनोगे? हाँ। चलो, वेरी गुड। आप बताइए, क्योंकि यहाँ पे एक छोटा सा गांव है, मतलब मयूरभंज का एक पिछड़ा हुआ इलाका माना जाता था। आज की डेट में अगर यहाँ से वो राष्ट्रपति बनती है तो बहुत एक गर्व की बात है।
हाँ, बहुत गर्व की बात है और देश के लिए भी गर्व की बात है, जो इतना छोटा गांव से निकलकर इतना बड़ा देश को संभाल रही हैं। तो आज की बेटी को तो गर्व तो होना चाहिए ना।
और दूसरे लोगों को भी लगता है कुछ कि हम लोग भी मतलब आगे कुछ कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि वो यहाँ से बाहर जाके कॉलेज किया, उन्होंने पढ़ाई करी, फिर आगे जॉब किया, तो दूसरी लड़कियां भी आगे बढ़ सकती है। वैसे यहाँ पे लड़कियों का क्या है, अगर अभी पढ़ने में इंटरेस्ट है उनको, सबको?
हाँ, सबका तो इंटरेस्ट है। अभी तो उन लोग का इंटरेस्ट भी बढ़ जाएगा ना, क्योंकि गांव से निकल के जा रही है तो दीदी सबको तो इंटरेस्ट लगेगा ही ना। वो लोग भी कुछ करने के लिए सोच लेंगे। ठीक है, आगे।
आपका नाम बताइए।
मेरा नाम विनय कुमार गिरी है।
और आप पड़ोस में रहते हैं उनके?
हाँ, पड़ोस में सामने में रहते हैं।
So, initial reactions here from Droupadi Murmu's village. This is her ancestral home. This is where she grew up. And then, of course, the rest of it, we know that she moved away from here, did her college, she went on, she got married, then she picked up a job, a government job in a town close by. And after that, she became an MLA with the BJP, two-time MLA, governor, and now probably she is all set to become the next president of the country, and she will make history as probably the first tribal woman to become the president of this country. It's indeed a great honor for the people of this village, and especially for the people here in her home. In Upparbeda village, with cameraman Gauri Prasad, Harsha Kumari Singh for NDTV.
All right, so Droupadi Murmu all set to create history. Meanwhile, in the vice presidential race, the opposition is pitting former Union Minister Margaret Alva against BJP's Jagdeep Dhankar. The announcement was made by the National Congress Party Chief Sharad Pawar after an opposition meeting. The announcement being made yesterday evening, and a 5-term member of Parliament, Margaret Alva has held Parliamentary Affairs and Youth Affairs portfolios in the Central Cabinet. She has served as the 17th Governor of Goa, the 23rd Governor of Gujarat and the 20th Governor of Rajasthan, as well as the 4th Governor of Uttarakhand. The NDA earlier had announced Jagdeep Dhankar, the former Governor of Bengal, as its candidate for the post, and Jagdeep Dhankar will be filing his nominations today. Shortly after the announcement, Margaret Alva tweeted, "It is a privilege and an honour to be nominated as the candidate of the joint opposition for the post of Vice President of India. I accept this nomination with great humility and thank leaders of the opposition for the faith that they've put in me. Jai Hind." So today, Jagdeep Dhankar will be filing his nomination and Margaret Alva will be coming to Delhi, and this on a day that the presidential elections are also taking place, the first day of the monsoon session. So a lot in store for today. Let's go back to Sunil Prabhu for more on this. So Sunil, Margaret Alva is the opposition candidate for vice presidentship. Also today, the presidential elections are taking place. Give us the details firstly about the presidential elections, about how they'll be conducted and when they'll begin.
Well, in a short while from now, in the next hour, the presidential elections will start. Of course, some of the early voters will be the Prime Minister himself, along with his cabinet colleagues, as well as opposition leaders who will be casting their ballot. It's clearly the stage is set. It's, of course, as you rightly pointed out earlier, it's quite clear that the advantage is Murmu, but Mr. Yashwant Sinha, and it's an election, so we'll have to wait till that final declaration takes place and the voting takes place. But Mr. Yashwant Sinha appealing to people to vote, use their conscience to vote. This is an election which does not go according to party lines. It goes clearly, it's left to the conscience of every MP and MLA to cast his ballot. And also the Vice President nominee of the NDA, who's also the former governor of West Bengal, all set to file his nomination today. Margaret Alva too expected in the capital, and happy that she has been considered as the vice presidential nominee. So clearly the stage is set for an election in the vice president. The presidential election, as you rightly pointed out today, which gets underway across various state capitals, at various state legislatures, where MLAs as well as MPs in the capital will be casting their ballot.
All right, Sunil, thanks so much for joining us with those details. So in an hour from now, though, that election for the president will begin. Well, time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, how the aviation minister chaired a high-level meeting after several mid-air incidents. We'll get you the details. Welcome back. A bench headed by Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana will on Wednesday hear a clutch of petitions on the dispute between Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and Shiv Sena Chief Uddhav Thackeray seeking disqualification of rebel Shiv Sena MLAs. The Thackeray camp claims the Eknath Shinde-led government is illegal until the top court decides on disqualifications, and the rebels claim they are the real Sena with an overwhelming majority of party MLAs. The Shiv Sena had on Tuesday requested Maharashtra governor not to administer the oath to any minister in the Eknath Shinde government, saying the legality of the decision to appoint Eknath Shinde as the chief minister itself is in question. In other news, the Union Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia on Sunday chaired a high-level meeting with senior officials of the Ministry and Directorate General of Civil Aviation over air safety. This after 3 aircrafts of international carriers made emergency landings in various airports in the country in the last 48 hours, making it a day of technical emergencies for various airlines. Scindia directed officials in the meeting that there should be no compromise with the passengers' safety, adding that the safety is paramount priority. And in other news, an all-party meeting on the turmoil in Sri Lanka has been called on Tuesday evening with briefings by Union Ministers Nirmala Sitharaman and S. Jaishankar. The government said following appeals by Tamil Nadu-based parties to intervene in the crisis. At a meeting of parties ahead of the monsoon session of Parliament, the DMK and AIADMK demanded that India intervene in the neighbouring country, which is facing its worst economic emergency in 7 decades. So therefore, an all-party meeting will take place on Tuesday. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan parliament is expected to choose its next president on Wednesday. The island nation is slowly emerging from unrest. It marked 100 days of the anti-government protests on Sunday. But 100 days of Gota Gogama is just the beginning, is what the protesters say. Here's a report.
"28-year-old Nazli Hameen is a civil engineer turned youth activist. Frequent and unscheduled power outages at his apartment forced him onto the streets.
I mean, when you are fighting against a dictatorship like Rajapaksa regime, I would rather call it a mafia, Rajapaksa mafia, and someone like Ranil Wickremesinghe, it's completely understandable you are fighting not only against them, but their entire team of networks which might use their entire money on social media's campaign, spending for rumors and everything. So it has been, like I said before, it's been very overwhelming. Sometimes you fall really low. Sometimes you just cry it out loud as well. So it's been a very tough ride.
Gota Gogama completes 100 days, and this youngster tells us that there has not been a single day that has gone by that he has not thought about his family, who lives nearly 200 kilometers away from him. Just like Nazli, several other youngsters have lost their jobs for protesting day in and day out continuously. Gota Gogama today sustains with donations from various NGOs and foreign donations. 54-year-old Vishakha left grandchildren home to be a part of the protests. Though she has taken part in several protests in the past, the Sri Lankan uprising is one of a kind, she says.
I see in Sri Lanka the universities are closed for more than 3 years and people are suffering without gas, people are suffering without electricity, people are suffering without fuel. So we wanted a change because we were trying to tell our people who are governing the country this is not the way to handle things. But we saw day by day it's going into corruption and corruption and corruption. Nothing is happening. So our younger generation, they thought they should speak for us as mothers. The pain that we had, we couldn't come out and say, but our children stood for us and they came out and said, no, we want a system change.
So you are here in support of the youngsters?
Exactly, I'm there supporting youngsters.
A war they waged against the government. Many lives lost in the struggle. 100 days of Gota Gogama is just the beginning, says the protesters. In Sri Lanka with camera person Kumar, Shrija for NDTV.
All right, so let's get started, and first let's focus on the monsoon session of Parliament, which begins today. As we've mentioned, it's likely to be a stormy one. The opposition parties have geared up to corner the centre over Agnipath military recruitment scheme, inflation, unemployment, as well as the alleged collapse of constitutional bodies.
Right, Gargi, and a day after the government urged all parties to cooperate for a smooth functioning of the House, and today the session is beginning. And after an all-party meet on Sunday, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi said that 32 bills are set to be tabled in the two houses, of which 14 are ready. The government, he said, wants discussions on all of them in a democratic way, and some of them have already been discussed by the standing committees of the Parliament.
Well, let's go across to Arvind for more on this. And Arvind, as we said, a lot of, work stacked up for this monsoon session, but opposition parties also ready to corner the government. In fact, the Congress has already put in a motion. They want a discussion on the Agnipath scheme in the Rajya Sabha today.
Yeah, Gargi, the monsoon session of the parliament begins today and it will go on at least till August 12th. Whereas the government has come up with almost 24 new bills for the upcoming monsoon session, wherein they have also listed almost 14 pending bills. Also, in total, almost 38 legislations will be moved by the government. All this 24, if you could see the 24 bills, the new bills that will be introduced, that also includes some important ones like press registration bill and also insolvency and bankruptcy code bill, amendment bill, and also very importantly the new forest bill. So all these are the new bills, contentious bills that the government wants to introduce in the upcoming or the ongoing monsoon session, where they want to pass all these three important contentious bills in this ongoing session. But very importantly, opposition parties are also gearing up for a united show inside the parliament. Even yesterday, all the opposition parties under the leadership of Mallikarjuna Kharge, the leader of opposition in Rajya Sabha, had a meeting and wherein they have discussed to put a united fight inside the parliament, wherein we can expect all the opposition parties to raise important issues like Agnipath and also inflation and also unemployment, and also very importantly this time they are asking for a discussion on the Chinese intrusion, etc. So all these very important points or important issues will also be raised by the opposition parties, but the government is very clear that they have the numbers and they can pass all their legislation that they want to bring in the ongoing monsoon session.
Right, Arvind, thanks so much for joining us with those details. We'll of course see, Gargi, how the session pans out today. A lot of important issues to be discussed.
That's right, and Arvind, do stay on for the next news as well.
Right, and it's today that more than 4,000 MPs and MLAs will cast their votes to elect the 15th President of India. It's National Democratic Alliance's presidential candidate Droupadi Murmu versus opposition's joint pick Yashwant Sinha, who are the two candidates in the race for the Rashtrapati Bhavan. But the numbers are stacked up for Droupadi Murmu, isn't it?
That's right, and the numbers stacked for her, with several regional parties having extended their support to her. She was a former governor of Jharkhand, and her victory will be marked by several firsts. She will be the first president born in independent India. At 64, Droupadi Murmu will be the youngest occupant of Rashtrapati Bhavan, besides being the first tribal leader to hold the country's top office. Sinha, as we know, is the joint opposition candidate. He's backed by the Congress, the NCP, Trinamool, Left Party, Samajwadi Party, RJD, and interestingly, right at the last moment, Aam Aadmi Party also coming out in support of Yashwant Sinha. Well, let's go across now to Harsha, who joins us from Droupadi Murmu's village in Rairangangpur. She joins us with the younger brother of Droupadi Murmu. Also, Arvind with us. First to you, Arvind, just to tell our viewers how this election takes place, and the Prime Minister expected to be one of the first to cast his vote.
Yeah, Gargi, the voting for the presidential election will begin exactly 54 minutes from now. The voting will begin at somewhere around 10 a.m. So all the MPs will cast their votes inside the parliament, wherein the Rajya Sabha Secretary General is the presiding officer for the presidential election. So all the MPs will cast their votes in the parliament, whereas the MLAs will be casting their votes in their respective assemblies. So almost over 4,500 people will be casting their votes to elect the next president of India. So in all likelihood, that numbers are stacked for Droupadi Murmu, the NDA nominee, wherein not just the BJP supporting, but also the allies, very important allies, and also like-minded parties like Shiv Sena, and also YSR Congress, BJD, and also very importantly BSP, and also Jharkhand Mukti Morcha. All these parties have already pledged their support for Droupadi Murmu, so the numbers are very much in favor of Droupadi Murmu. So by 5 p.m. we'll get to know that the voting will be finished, and then after that we'll get to know who is the next president of India. Though opposition parties have come together to field Yashwant Sinha, but the numbers are not in favor of Yashwant Sinha, and it's very clear that Droupadi Murmu will be the first tribal woman leader to become the president of India.
Right, Arvind, thanks for joining us with those details. And let's now go across to Harsha, who is at the village of Droupadi Murmu in Rairangpur, and she is with the brother of the hopeful next president of India. Harsha,
it seems likely next president, because as Arvind was telling us, numbers stacked there, but yes.
Of course. So Harsha is with her brother, Tara Nisain Tudu. Harsha, what can you get us? What is the environment there in Droupadi Murmu's village?
Well, I have to tell you that, what has struck me is the simplicity of this home, the simplicity of this family. So what has struck me is the simplicity of this home and the simplicity of this family. We went yesterday to her village in Uppar Beda, and this is now Rai Rangpur, which is the town where she's built her house. In fact, her late husband built this very simple house, and her brother tells me this is just that one room that they have here, the rest of the house is inside. They bought a very small house and then extended it. There's just one policeman outside, and you can see on the walls photographs of Droupadi Murmu when she was governor of Jharkhand. Well, he's fondly called Diku Bhaiya, and I'm going to call him Diku Bhaiya. Diku Bhaiya, दीदी कैसे हैं, उनका स्वभाव कैसा है? आप बता रहे थे मेरे को जैसे एक गाड़ी है, अपना गाड़ी से आते हैं जाते हैं, मतलब बहुत सिंपल है, बहुत ही सिंपल है.
एकदम सिंपल है वो, मतलब कोई ये का ऐसा नहीं है कि वो आपको वो जैसे बोले कि वो भी एक गाड़ी है, वो भी उसका बेटी का नाम पे वो गाड़ी भी है, बस उसी गाड़ी से जाना आना करते रहता है. अभी वो गाड़ी भुवनेश्वर में छोड़ के वो चला गया दिल्ली.
और झारखंड के गवर्नर से जब रिटायर हुए तो यहाँ पर रुके हैं 1 साल, अभी प्रेसिडेंशियल कैंडिडेट बनने के पहले यहाँ पर 1 साल रुके हैं इसी घर में, यहीं पे रहते हैं. मतलब और अपना उनका रूटीन कैसे रहता है? इतना सिंपल होम में रहते हैं.
नहीं, उसका रूटीन तो ऐसे ही है कि वो 3 बजे उठ जाता है, उसके बाद मेडिटेशन कर लेते हैं, उसके बाद सुबह 4:30 बजे से मॉर्निंग वॉक चले जाता है मेरे वाइफ का साथ. वहाँ से आके थोड़ा फैन का ये में बैठने के बाद नहा लेते हैं, उसका बाद फिर योगा करते हैं. योगा का करने के बाद 10:30 बजे जाके वो टिफिन उपिन वगैरह खाते हैं.
और अभी भी लोगों से मिलना जुलना, सोशल वर्क भी करते हैं?
हाँ, वो मतलब हमेशा कोई भी आने से उन लोग से मिलता जुलता था और अच्छा बुरा बात करता था उन लोग से.
पहाड़पुर में स्कूल भी खोला है लड़की लोग के लिए उन्होंने, है ना?
वो उसका बेटी का नाम में पहाड़पुर में स्कूल खोला गया है, उसका नाम पे नहीं है, वो बेटी का नाम पे है. इस पहाड़पुर में स्कूल है
जी. तो मतलब वो गर्ल्स एजुकेशन में बिलीव करते हैं, वो चाहते हैं कि लड़की लोग पढ़े, क्योंकि आपका जो संथाल ट्राइब है एक बहुत बैकवर्ड ट्राइब है और इसमें से एक लड़की का इतना सामने आना. इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट दैट द्रौपदी मुर्मू वाज द फर्स्ट गर्ल फ्रॉम हर विलेज टू गो टू कॉलेज, एंड डिंकू भैया रिमेंबर्स दैट ही वाज वेरी स्मॉल व्हेन शी लेफ्ट होम टू स्टडी इन भुवनेश्वर.
हाँ जी, उसी आदमी सब भी शिक्षा के लिए मतलब आगे बढ़े, उसी चलते इस गांव में स्कूल खुला है. वो भी मतलब बाहर में जाके उसी टाइम पढ़ाई किया भुवनेश्वर में जाके, वही सोच के वो भी गांव में मतलब उसका बेटी का नाम पे स्कूल खोला हुआ है.
Droupadi Murmu's life has also been struck by personal tragedy, deep personal tragedy. She lost her husband. She lost 2 young sons at the age of 25 and 21. It's still actually moved her. He was telling me, her brother was telling me that even today she does not keep pictures of her family on display here because it still hurts her. दीदी को बहुत दुख हुआ है जिंदगी में, 2 एकदम जवान बेटा चला गया. एक तरह से अपने आप को संभाला है, लेकिन अंदर ही अंदर दुख तो है.
तो अंदर तो कभी याद होने से तो दुख तो ही लगता है, लेकिन अपने आप को बहुत संभाला है. संभाल के मतलब अभी इतना दूर यहाँ तो को आ गया है संभाल के, और इतना संभाला हुआ है अभी मतलब जो सोचता है वो आगे के लिए सोचता है.
देश का पहला नागरिक बन सकते हैं वो आपका, दीदी क्या कहना है आपको?
वो तो हमको बहुत खुशी लग रहा है कि देश का 1 नंबर नागरिक हो गया, जो होने जा रहा. हमको इतना खुश लगता है, मतलब हम भी मतलब ये नहीं कर सकता हूँ कि कितना खुश हूँ करके. हाँ जी.
और जो लोग हैं यहाँ पर, आपका गांव में जो लोग हैं, वो भी हम कल मिले थे, सबसे बात कर रहे थे, सब बहुत खुश हैं कि एक आदिवासी महिला वहाँ जाएंगे. और मतलब एक तरह से इतिहास है ये, इट इज़ हिस्ट्री. फर्स्ट ट्राइबल वुमन प्रेसिडेंट इफ शी विंस, व्हिच आई थिंक शी इज ऑल सेट टू.
वो तो 100 आदमी को ही खुश लगता है. हमको तो बहुत खुश है, लेकिन 100 आदमी को इतना खुश लगता है. पहले लेडीज मतलब संथाल से जा रहा, मतलब इंडिया का 1 नंबर होके, तो इतना खुश रहता है कि आदमी सबका भी. ये तो 100 आदमी आप भी जानता होगा, मैं और क्या बोलूँ उसका बारे.
So there you heard him, the younger brother of Droupadi Murmu. He's 12 years younger than her. And like I was saying, what really struck me about this home and the village is the complete simplicity. You know, when we drove in, there is just one security personnel outside. He tells me that she just has one car that is also on her daughter's name. She uses that to move around. And after she retired as governor of Jharkhand, when she left the Raj Bhavan, she came and lived here. She lived right here, and that's her chair. In fact, they keep that a chair for her, and usually they don't like it if people sit there, though of course her family members are allowed to stay there, are allowed to sit there. So, you know, very heartwarming really, and personally for us also to come here to her village and see that a woman from a village like this, you know, in the backward area of Orissa, in Mayurbhanj district, could well become the first citizen of our country. It's definitely a message of empowerment and a message of hope.
Right, Harsha, thanks for joining us. Gargi, as Harsha said, it's definitely a historic day for India. She's going to be the youngest president of India and the first tribal woman
president in the country. So from such a simple background to one of the highest offices in the country.
Right. And meanwhile, in the vice presidential race, the opposition is pitting former Union Minister Margaret Alva against BJP's Jagdeep Dhankar. The announcement was made by Nationalist Congress Party Chief Sharad Pawar after an opposition meeting.
A 5-term member of parliament, Margaret Alva has held the parliamentary affairs and youth affairs portfolios in the central cabinet. She's also served as a governor several times. She was the 17th governor of Goa, the 23rd governor of Gujarat, 20th governor of Rajasthan and the 4th governor of Uttarakhand. Now remember, the NDA has picked Jagdeep Dhankar, the former governor of Bengal, and Mamta Betar as its candidate for the post, and Dhankar will be filing his nomination today. And shortly after the announcement was made yesterday, Margaret Alva tweeted, "It's a privilege and an honor to be nominated as the candidate of the joint opposition for post of vice president. I accept this nomination with great humility and thank the leaders of the opposition for the faith they put in me. Jai Hind."
Right, Gargi. So there you have it. The vice president nominees are going to file their nominations today. It's an action-packed day for the parliament. The presidential elections on one hand, and on the other hand, the vice presidential nominees will file their nominations. And NDA's candidate is Jagdeep Dhankar, who is the governor of West Bengal, and he was also a BJP veteran. And on the other side, it's Margaret Alva.
All right, well, let's move on to other news now, and very disturbing news coming in from Jammu and Kashmir.
2 army officers have been killed and few others injured in a grenade blast near LOC, and army says that it's an accidental grenade blast, and a captain and a junior commissioned officer were killed in this grenade blast at Mindar sector of Pooch district of Jammu and Kashmir, and the army said that it was an accidental grenade blast which took place when troops were performing their duties near the line of control.
Right, very, very disturbing to lose, two officers in this manner in an accidental blast. According to the army, the flats caused injured to the soldiers, who were immediately evacuated by helicopter to Udhampur. Let's go across to Nazir for more. Nazir, tell us more about this very, very disturbing accident.
Exactly, this is what army is saying. There was a grenade explosion, which army said was accidental grenade explosion, in which several soldiers were injured. 2 of them, 1 captain and a junior commissioned officer, died due to injuries in a hospital. Injured were evacuated in a helicopter to Udhampur Army Base Hospital, where 2 officers died. And it is something very disturbing. It is unclear if armies are doing a probe. So far, army spokesman different spokesmen only said that there was an accidental grenade blast in Mindar sector near the line of control in Pooch district, where 2 soldiers, 2 officers have died and some others have been injured. This is the second incident in Pooch area only in last few days. Just few days back, there was a fratricide incident in an army camp in Pooch, and in which 2 soldiers were killed and 2 others were injured. And now we see this incident. Army is very highly trained to handle grenades and any other major equipment, arms and ammunition. But here something has gone wrong, and there has been an explosion While the army is saying they were performing their duty near the line of control, there was an explosion in which two of these army officers, a captain and a JCO, have been killed, and some other army soldiers have been injured who are being treated at Army Base Hospital.
All right, Nazir, thanks so much for joining us with that. And again, very, very disturbing news to lose two officers in such an accident. An accidental grenade blast is what the army is saying.